Hey, welcome to another video. In this video, we're going to be creating the levels that we're going to use in the tutorial series, as well as I'm going to explain what world partition is, and hopefully by the end of this video, you will have a good enough understanding of what it is to decide if you want to use it in your game or not. With that, let's get into it. I'm in my test project because I already have a map loaded in here and some of the buildings have already been separated, and it will make a good illustration of what world partition is and how it works. So to enable world partition, you head over to edit, project settings, and then in the search you can look for world partition, and then over here is engine world partition. These will usually be off. You can just enable the new maps enable world partition, and then new maps enable world partition streaming. And then once you've enabled those, it will ask you to restart Unreal Engine, and then it will bring you back. And then once you come back into it, then any new level that you create after enabling world partition will have world partitioning on it. So as I say, you should probably wait until the end of the video. Once you have enabled it, in the tab where the details is and the world settings, you'll find a new one called world partition, and then this will just give you an overview of the world. But to find the world partition settings, it is in the world settings tab, and you'll find this new section here called world partition setup. Head over to runtime settings, runtime partitions, index, and then over to the main layer, and then here you will have all your settings for the world partition. So let me just go over to the top so you can get a better view of how it is. So as you can see, this map is quite big. I think it's about 2 kilometers, give or take. And if you select the show grid preview, then you can see your debug color over here. Mine is pink by default. I never changed it. So everything that is highlighted is the loaded area. So world partition will load and unload information in the world based on the load area. So to find the load area is down here by the loading range. Mine is currently set to that big. If I change it, you can see that less and less things are being highlighted. So the little circle, I don't know if you can see it, but let me zoom in. Okay, I can't exactly zoom in because as I move, it moves as well. But there is a line there where the mouse cursor is over there. That is the sphere that is the load range. So anything that overlaps with the sphere will be loaded into the level. Then you also have cubes or cell sizes, which is over here the cell size. Mine is also set to very large. If I change this, as you can see, the cells become smaller, these little cubes over here. So where the sphere overlaps with the cubes, anything within that cube will be loaded. Even if the sphere overlaps with just a small little corner of the cube, everything that exists within that cube will be loaded in. You can make it as small as you want, as you can see now, the little cubes, and then you can also see these load radius a lot better. That is the cell size. You can freely change this as is, and then it will divide up your world. So each cube is effectively treated as its own level. So it's basically kind of like level streaming, but on a much larger scale for the world instead. World partition, as I understand it from what I've read about it, it is an effective way for open world games. If you plan on making an open world game, then it's recommended that you will use world partitioning, because instead of loading the entire map, you only load whatever overlaps with the load range. And then as the player moves, because the player is treated as the center of the load area, so as the player moves, whatever the player is moving towards will be loaded in to RAM, and then whatever the player has left behind will then be unloaded. A way of optimizing performance. To show how world partition work, I broke up some of the buildings in the world. I think I'm going to leave it as is and then just show how this works. So if I just quickly go and play the level, so as you all can see, some of the things are loaded in, some of the things are not. Now in front of where I currently am, there should be a building that should appear in the distance as I move forward. So come, let's see that actually does happen. Okay, I think my cell size is a little bit too big. Then I'm going to reduce the area of how much is actually loaded. Now, as previously shown, there was a tall building in the distance over there, but if I go closer to it, As you can see, it popped in, and then if I back up again, it will then disappear. So that is world partition. So whatever is within the load range will be loaded in, whatever is outside of that range will then be offloaded. And depending on how well you optimize your level, you might get messages like what I'm getting, where it's telling you that it's loading in all the shaders and textures. As you can see also, that it seems like something else also disappeared, but then it doesn't yet again. Some of the buildings disappear again because they were offloaded. So that is how world partitioning works. What I would say is, depending on the size of the world that you're creating, world partitioning will be an option to consider or not. I think anything that's short of about 2 kilometers by 2 kilometers, you probably don't need to enable world partitioning for that. But it also depends on how much detail you've added into the world. As a general idea, anything smaller than 2 kilometers by 2 kilometers, it probably wouldn't do much just to have the player sit and look at the loading screen for a couple seconds. I would say anything above maybe 2.5 by 2.5 kilometers, you should start considering whether you want to enable world partition or not. The reason for that is generally the player can see, give or take, about a kilometer ahead, in terms of world scaling. So anything from where the player is to about a kilometer ahead of them, the player should give or take be able to see, depending on how big the object is. And that is where I think you should start considering world partition, and then anything larger than that. But then again, it also comes down to, it's like a give or take. If you enable world partition, then you can have faster load times. The upside is that if you don't use world partition, you'll have longer load times, because instead of just loading anything within the loaded range, you will then load in the entire range. Now, the other side of that is, if you don't optimize your level very well, then like what happened there, there will be stuttering because the textures and the objects have to be loaded in as the player moves, so that could break up the immersion. The other side to that is, if you're loading the whole level, despite the fact that at the beginning the player might have said looking at the loading screen for longer than they otherwise would have wanted to, then you won't actually break the immersion, because you already have the whole map loaded in, and they can just freely move around without having to worry about things being loaded in and then other things being loaded out. So that is my understanding of what the world partition is, well, to the best of my understanding of how it is and how it works. So with that, we're going to go over to the other part, and we're going to create the levels. Now back in the tutorial project, and we're going to create the levels. We're add over to the maps, open up the dealership. It's the first one. Right click, new level. I'm going to call this one dealership. Then we're going to head back to the maps, the garage. Right click, level, garage. Then we're going to head back to maps, main menu. Right click, new level, main menu. Head over to the open world folder. Right click, level, open world. And then in the last one, the workshop, right click, level, workshop. And that does it for this video. In the next video, we are going to import more vehicles so that we can set up the parent blueprint classes. And then we're also going to add a few pieces of code to the parent vehicle blueprint so that we can configure the car, or at least load the car's configuration. We are going to need that for the main menu level when you start working on that. That brings you to the end of the video, and until the next one.